You wouldn't worry so much about what others think of you if you realized how seldom they do. Eleanor Roosevelt. Part 1. The hidden snare of living for the eyes of others. I remember standing in the elevator of a tall glass building, heart pounding, hands slightly shaking. I had just pitched an idea in front of a boardroom full of people, executives, experts, people who looked like they'd never doubted themselves a single day in their lives. The moment I walked out of that room, I wasn't thinking about what I had said. I was thinking about how I looked when I said it. Did my voice crack? Was that one guy smirking? By the time I reached the ground floor, I had already replayed the scene 100 times in my head. Each version worse than the last. I wasn't living in the present anymore. I was trapped inside an imaginary courtroom where I stood on trial, and everyone else was the jury. And here's the funny thing. 5 minutes later, those same people were already thinking about their next meeting, their lunch order, their emails. My anxiety, invisible. My internal storm, non-existent to the world outside. But this wasn't a one-time event. It started earlier than that. Back in school, when you hesitated to answer the teacher's question because you didn't want to sound stupid. In college, when you wore the safe outfit instead of the one you actually loved. At work, when you stayed silent in meetings, even though your idea could have changed the whole direction. We've been trained, no, conditioned, to see ourselves through other people's eyes, and it's exhausting. It's like trying to dance while constantly watching yourself in the mirror, afraid of looking foolish, afraid of being judged, forgetting that dancing, real dancing, only happens when you let go. There's a quiet fear that lives inside so many of us. Not fear of failure, not even fear of rejection, but the fear of being seen and not being liked. The fear of being noticed and then silently disapproved of. And so we shrink. We hesitate. We filter ourselves through imaginary opinions of people who, in truth, aren't paying that much attention. We give up freedom for approval, authenticity for applause, peace of mind for a few polite nods from strangers who won't remember our names tomorrow. But what if we stopped? What if we truly, deeply understood, not just intellectually but emotionally, that other people's opinions are not facts? That their approval is not oxygen? What if we could walk into a room without performing, speak our minds without rehearsing how it might sound in someone else's ears, choose what's right for us, even if no one claps? The Stoics had a name for this kind of freedom. It wasn't arrogance, it wasn't rebellion, it was clarity. The clarity that comes when you stop giving your power away to people who were never meant to hold it. So before we dive into what Stoicism can teach us about escaping the trap of other people's opinions, I want you to ask yourself something. Whose voice is running your life right now? Yours or theirs? Part 2. Why do we surrender our inner peace to the opinions of others? Number 1. Nature and society. There's a reason why we care so deeply about what others think of us, and it goes far beyond personal insecurity. It's biology. It's evolution. It's the ancient programming of a species that survived by belonging. Thousands of years ago, being accepted by the group wasn't about comfort. It was about survival. If your tribe rejected you, you didn't just lose friends. You lost protection, food, fire, and the ability to stay alive. Being cast out meant being alone in a world full of predators, storms, and starvation. So our ancestors developed a deep sensitivity to judgment. The fear of being disliked was literally wired into our brains as a defense mechanism. Approval meant safety. Disapproval meant danger. This instinct didn't just fade with time. Modern humans still carry this same emotional circuitry. The only difference is the stakes have changed. We're no longer fighting off saber-toothed tigers, but we still feel panic when we're left out of a conversation. or when someone rolls their eyes in a meeting. It's not rational, it's ancient. Psychologists call this the social pain overlap theory, the idea that our brains process social rejection in the same way they process physical pain. When someone criticizes you, ignores you, or publicly disagrees with you, your brain reacts almost identically to being physically hurt. MRI scans show that the same regions light up, particularly the anterior cingulate cortex, which is also activated when you stub your toe or burn your hand. Rejection hurts, not metaphorically, but neurologically. And then there's the spotlight effect, our tendency to overestimate how much others notice and remember about us. We think everyone is watching, judging, evaluating. But the truth? Most people are too busy thinking about themselves to obsess over what we did or didn't say. Still, the fear remains. We carry it into classrooms, into offices, into relationships. We second-guess our words, our clothes, our choices, not because we're vain, but because we're human. This is how deeply social animals we are. Approval feels like oxygen. Disapproval feels like suffocation. And while that instinct once kept us alive, today it often keeps us small. It pushes us toward conformity, away from authenticity. It makes us say yes when we mean no, smile when we want to scream, stay silent when our truth is begging to be spoken. Understanding this fear isn't about blaming ourselves. It's about recognizing that we were built to feel it, and then deciding whether we'll let it run our lives. Number 2, the traps of the modern world. It starts with a scroll. You're lying in bed, thumb gliding across the screen, face lit up by the soft glow of your phone. One post shows a friend celebrating a promotion. Another shows someone buying their first home. A couple you barely know is vacationing in Greece, laughing beneath the Santorini sunset. Everyone seems to be winning, louder, faster, and shinier than you. You were fine 5 minutes ago, but now there's a quiet ache forming in your chest. A voice whispers, "You're behind." This is the modern arena, not a tribal village, not a coliseum, but a digital battlefield, where validation is currency and performance is survival. Likes, shares, comments, blue check marks. We dress up our lives like storefronts, polish every word, filter every photo, not to document life, but to curate it, to control how we're seen. Because in the age of eyes everywhere, perception feels like reality. But the problem is, no one's life is that perfect. Behind the cropped smiles and saturated skies are late nights, missed calls, anxious thoughts. Yet we compare our messy behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel. And we lose. Every time. Social media didn't invent insecurity. It just amplified it. It gave every stranger a front row seat to our lives. And worse, gave us a seat to theirs. We're constantly watching, measuring, comparing. The applause feels good, but the silence after a post? That feels like failure. There's a term psychologists use, social comparison theory. It says that we determine our own worth based on how we measure up with others. In the past, that others meant the few people around us. Today, it means millions of faces, influencers, entrepreneurs, models, travelers, all living lives we're told we should want. And when we don't match up, we assume something's wrong with us. This creates a cycle. We see others doing more. We feel less. As we feel less, we post more. And once we post more, we crave more validation. But no amount of validation ever feels like enough. Because the bar keeps moving, and we're chasing a version of success that was never ours to begin with. And here's the trap. The more we try to be impressive, the more we lose what's real. The more we craft an image, the more disconnected we become from who we are when no one's watching. We weren't designed to be consumed this way, to be liked, rated, judged every day by people we've never met. Yet here we are, curating our lives for strangers and forgetting how to live for ourselves. In this new world, the fear of judgment hasn't disappeared. It's multiplied. It's digitized. It follows us into our homes, our relationships, even our sleep. So the question isn't just, why do I care what they think? It's, who gave them the power to define what matters? Part 3. How does Stoicism perceive this matter? Number 1. Exercise mastery over oneself. Imagine your mind as a fortress. Inside its high stone walls is everything you truly control: your thoughts, your choices, your values, your response. Outside those walls, chaos, weather, war, whispers, storm, the world doing what it always does, changing without your permission. This is how the Stoics saw life. They believed that the path to peace wasn't found in controlling the world, but in mastering the fortress within. Because no matter how loud the outside gets, you're always free to choose how you respond. Epictetus said it simply: some things are up to us and some are not. You can't control what people say. You can't control the market. You can't control whether someone likes you or misjudges you. But you can control your actions. You can control your effort. You can control whether you meet insult with anger or silence, whether you let fear paralyze you or move anyway. It sounds simple, even obvious, but most people live backwards. They pour all their energy into rearranging the weather outside the walls, begging for approval, manipulating impressions, chasing status, and then wonder why they feel powerless when the storm still comes. The Stoics offer a reversal. You don't need to fix the world. You need to fortify your response to it. Marcus Aurelius ruled the Roman Empire, yet he wrote in his journal like a monk in exile. In the midst of war, disease, betrayal, and loss, he kept returning to one truth. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. It's like sailing. You can't control the wind, but you can set your sails. You can't predict the waves, but you can hold the wheel. And even if the storm rages, if your hands are steady and your heart is clear, you still move forward. This is the heart of Stoicism. It's not detachment. It's not emotionless. It's disciplined clarity. It's choosing again and again to place your peace in what you control and release what you don't. It means refusing to hand over your joy to someone else's mood. It means not letting the noise outside drown out the calm within. It means building a kind of quiet strength, one no storm can touch. So when the world judges, changes, ignores, praises, betrays, forgets, let it. Because your power isn't out there. It never was. It's here, behind the walls, in your hands, in this breath, in this moment. Number 2, I do not live to satisfy the expectations of others. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but we care more about their opinions than our own." It's one of those lines that punches you quietly, not with volume, but with truth. Because if we really think about it, how often do we make choices not because they feel right, but because they look right to someone else? We pick careers that sound impressive. We smile when we'd rather speak up. We post, edit, filter, nod, agree, all to maintain an image that keeps others comfortable, even if it costs us our own clarity. But here's the flaw in that way of living. When you spend your life trying to be liked by everyone, you slowly become no one. Seneca warned us centuries ago. If you live according to other people's opinions, you will never be free. And that's what many of us are doing. Living lives shaped like apologies, forever adjusting ourselves to avoid disapproval, to win affection, to fit in. But fit into what? A mold designed by people who don't know our hearts? Standards set by voices that change with the wind? The truth is, public opinion is one of the most unstable currencies you can ever trade your life for. Try to please one group, you'll offend another. Say what's popular today, and it might be canceled tomorrow. So if your identity is built on applause, your foundation will always shake. There's a dangerous myth we've inherited, that a good life is one that looks good to others. But the Stoics rejected that idea completely. To them, the good life wasn't external. It was internal. It was a life of virtue, of clarity, of integrity, lived in alignment with your values, not someone else's checklist. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." In other words, growth often looks like rebellion. Freedom often looks like failure to people who are still trapped. So here's the question. Would you rather be respected for someone you're not, or disrespected for someone you truly are? Would you rather disappoint a stranger or betray yourself? Because the longer you chase universal approval, the more fragmented you become. And no one, no matter how charming, beautiful, talented, or wise, has ever managed to win everyone's favor. Not even the Stoics, not even the greats, and certainly not us. So stop trying to be liked by the world. Start focusing on being true to yourself, even if the world never claps, because that's the kind of peace no opinion can ever buy. Part 4. Freedom commences from within. Number 1. To whom do you owe your life's purpose? Who are you doing this for? Really? That job you stayed in even when it drained you? That degree you never wanted but pursued anyway? That version of yourself you polish every morning before stepping outside? Who is it for? Is it for you or for the people watching? Would you still wear that smile if no one was looking? Would you still chase that goal if it wasn't impressive to others? Would you still post that picture if it got 0 likes? At what point did their voices become louder than your own? When did your life start to feel like a performance? You weren't born trying to please. As a child, you spoke your mind, laughed too loud, wore what you loved, asked for what you wanted. You didn't worry about being too much. You just were. So what changed? Whose approval became your oxygen? Whose judgment became your prison? Was it a parent's silence? A teacher's comment? A friend's raised eyebrow? A stranger's glance that stayed too long? And now, how many of your choices are still echoes of that moment? You say you're doing your best, but whose version of best are you chasing? And when was the last time you asked yourself what you actually want? Not what sounds right, not what looks good, not what earns applause, but what feels true. If no one ever complimented you again, if no one ever criticized you again, if no one ever noticed what you did, would you still live the same way? Would you still be proud? Would you still be you? Or would you finally breathe, finally speak, finally stop running? Not away from judgment, but toward yourself. Number 2, being understood is not essential. He walked through the crowded cafe with headphones on and eyes calm. Not the kind of calm you fake, but the kind that grows in silence. His shirt was a little wrinkled, his hair unstyled, his steps unhurried. People glanced at him. No reaction. Some looked twice. Still nothing. He wasn't rude, just free. I watched him for a while, sipping my coffee, wondering what it would feel like to move through the world that untouched by eyes. Most of us live as if we're on stage, every word rehearsed, every gesture calculated. We check the mirror not to see ourselves, but to predict how others will see us. We edit our thoughts before we speak, just in case they don't land the way we want them to. We shrink our weirdness, our wildness, our wonder, all to stay inside the lines of understood. But what if we're not meant to be understood by everyone? What if the deepest kind of peace doesn't come from being seen accurately, but from no longer needing to be seen at all? There's a freedom in being misunderstood, a strange kind of power in letting go of the need to explain. Because sometimes, the more you try to be understood, the more you abandon yourself in the process. Think of a tree in the middle of a field. It doesn't bend toward the people watching it. It doesn't grow straighter because someone approves. It doesn't bloom for praise. It simply stands, rooted, grounded, unshaken. And in that stillness, it becomes beautiful. Some people will never get you. Not because you're too complicated, but because they're too distracted, too consumed by their own noise to hear your quiet truth. And that's okay. The goal isn't to be decoded by everyone. The goal is to live in a way that makes sense to you, even if no one else applauds. To walk your path without narrating every step. To hold your peace like a secret garden, sacred, unshared, whole. Let them wonder. Let them misunderstand. Let them create their own stories about you. Because the moment you stop chasing their understanding, you make room for something far greater, your own. Part 5. Counsel or condemnation. How does one discern between the two? Number 1. To distinguish true counsel. Not all feedback is created equal. Some of it is gold, sharp, honest, uncomfortable, but ultimately transformative. And some of it is poison, dressed up as concern, but rooted in control, ego, or insecurity. So how do you know the difference? How do you tell when someone is helping you grow and when they're just projecting their own limits onto you? Here are 3 signs of genuine, honest feedback, the kind you should listen to, even when it stings. First sign: it comes from someone who knows you or wants to. Real feedback isn't thrown at you from a distance. It's offered by someone who's seen your context, your effort. They're not judging a single moment. They're engaging with your whole picture. Think of a mentor who's followed your journey. They might say, "I know why you made that decision, but here's how it landed on the team. Let's talk about it." That's not an attack. That's care. It doesn't always sound soft, but it comes from a place of respect, not superiority. By contrast, when a stranger online comments, "You're clearly in over your head," that's not feedback. That's noise. They don't know your heart. They haven't earned the right to shape it. Then the second sign. It's focused on behavior, not your identity. True feedback addresses what you did, not who you are. It might challenge your actions, your decisions, your tone, but it never reduces you to them. A good colleague might say, "In that meeting, you interrupted her 3 times. It made it hard for her to contribute." That's specific, actionable, anchored in reality. Toxic criticism, on the other hand, sounds like, "You're arrogant, you never listen." It paints with a brush so broad that it leaves no room for growth, only shame. People who care about you don't try to label you. They try to lift you. They believe you can change, and they give you the clarity to do so. And finally, the third sign. It's delivered in private, not in public performance. Feedback given in front of an audience, especially with sarcasm or a smirk, is rarely about your improvement. It's about their ego, their need to feel smart. But when someone pulls you aside, lowers their voice, and says, "Hey, can I share something I noticed?" That's a sign of integrity. They don't need credit for helping you. They're not scoring points. They just want you to win, even if no one sees it. The world is loud with opinions, but the voices that truly matter, they're the ones that speak with kindness, clarity, and care. not just to be heard, but to help you hear yourself more clearly. Number 2. Words of judgment that hurt. She was only 12 when it happened, standing at the front of the class, fingers gripping the edge of her paper, voice trembling just enough to betray the storm inside. She had worked on that poem for days, handwritten, crossed out, rewritten. A small act of bravery in a world that hadn't yet taught her to keep her words quiet. She finished the last line, looked up, and waited. A moment of silence. Then a boy at the back snorted and said, "That was dumb." The class laughed. Not all of them, but enough. She smiled, pretending it didn't land, sat down, said nothing. But something in her folded in on itself that day. A door closed. And for years after, she never read her writing aloud again. That's the thing about judgment. It doesn't need to be loud to leave a scar. It doesn't even need to be true. It just needs to arrive at the wrong moment when we're open, hopeful, reaching for something. And suddenly, we shrink. You grow up thinking you're over it. You become resilient, professional, mature. But that 12-year-old doesn't leave. She's still there, holding her poem, still wondering if her words matter, still flinching when someone raises an eyebrow or speaks in that same dismissive tone. Judgment is rarely about what's said. It's about the place it hits. It's about how much of yourself you had to reveal just to try, and how quickly that offering was dismissed. Years later, she started writing again. Late at night, never sharing, until one day, someone found her words and asked, "Why don't you show people this?" She paused and quietly said, "Because once I did." How many of us are carrying stories like that? Moments when someone, with a few careless words, made us doubt the most tender parts of ourselves. Moments when we didn't just feel rejected, we felt foolish for ever trying. And so we build armor. We polish, we perfect, we hide behind sarcasm or silence. Not because we don't want to be seen, but because we're terrified of being seen and dismissed. But the truth is, no one escapes judgment. Not the bold, not the quiet, not the perfect or the messy. What we can choose is whether we let those moments define us or refine us. You are not the laugh that echoed in that classroom. You are not the smirk, the shrug, the silence. You are the voice that spoke anyway, and that voice still matters. Part 6. A Stoic Lesson. Fulfillment from Within. Number 1. Comparison and the preservation of inner dignity. They say comparison is the thief of joy, but it's more than that. It's the silent assassin of self-respect. It doesn't storm in shouting. It creeps, slowly, quietly, until one day, you wake up and realize you no longer know how to feel proud of anything unless someone else claps for it. You got a raise? Well, someone your age is already a CEO. You're getting fit. Someone else has abs and a sponsorship deal. You published a book. Someone wrote 5. Got a movie deal. Won a prize. This is how comparison works. It doesn't just move the goalpost. It makes you feel like there was never any point in playing the game. I remember a friend, smart, thoughtful, deeply kind. He launched a small business, something he'd dreamed of for years. On launch day, he smiled like a child, posted a photo of his first sale, thanked the 2 people who believed in him. Then he saw another post. Someone he went to college with had raised $1 million in funding for their startup. Dozens of shares, thousands of likes, articles, buzz. He looked back at his own post. 5 likes, no comments. He didn't say anything, but I watched his shoulders sink. The smile didn't come back for weeks. It's not that the other person did anything wrong. It's that comparison stole something sacred, the joy of starting. Here's the lie comparison whispers. You're only valuable if you're ahead. And here's the truth. There is no race. There is no finish line. And even if there were, someone will always be faster, richer, more polished, more followed. But none of that has anything to do with your worth. Your value doesn't increase when someone else slows down, and it doesn't decrease when someone else speeds up. Seneca wrote, "No person has the power to have everything they want, but it is in their power not to want what they don't have." In other words, peace is not found in having more, but in needing less. Confidence isn't built by winning the comparison game. It's built by stepping out of it entirely, by recognizing that your path is yours, measured not by applause, but by alignment, by waking up and doing the work, even if no one's watching. You don't need to be the best. You just need to be true, and that is enough. Number 2, to live in accordance with true nature. To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. Ralph Waldo Emerson. You don't need to be understood. You need to be real, because the truth is, no matter how carefully you explain, how softly you speak, how perfectly you present yourself, some people will still get you wrong. They'll misread your silence. They'll twist your words. They'll project their fears onto your choice. And if you live for their understanding, you'll die by their misunderstanding. There comes a point when you have to stop editing yourself for every room you walk into. When you stop shrinking your dreams so they don't make others uncomfortable. When you stop filtering your truth just to be palatable. Living authentically is not about rebellion. It's about alignment. It's the quiet courage to say, "This is who I am," even if you don't get it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject. And the subject is you. No one else lives your life. No one else pays your emotional rent. So why should they get to write the rules?" We waste years trying to be legible to people who don't even speak our language. We translate ourselves into smaller, simpler versions. And for what? To be accepted in a place where we were never meant to belong? You were not born to be digestible. You were born to be whole. There is no amount of external approval that can replace the peace of living in alignment with yourself. No applause that can match the silence of knowing you didn't abandon your own voice. The world doesn't need another perfect mask. It needs your real face, even if it's messy. It needs your voice, even if it trembles. It needs your truth, even if not everyone claps. Because when you embrace your raw and authentic self, something changes. You stop apologizing. You stop begging to be seen, because you finally see yourself. And in that moment, you realize you were never lost. You were just hidden beneath all the roles you thought you had to play. You don't need to be understood. You need to be you. Fully, boldly, unapologetically. Even, especially, when the world doesn't understand. Number 3, who holds dominion over your soul? Who's driving your life right now? Is it you, or the voice in your head that sounds suspiciously like someone else? When you say yes to something, is it because you truly want it? Or because you're afraid of what might happen if you say no? When you dress in the morning, do you choose what feels like you, or what fits the image they expect? Are your dreams still yours, or have they slowly become a collage of borrowed opinions and filtered comparisons? When you make a decision, who are you trying to impress? And when you stay silent, who are you protecting? How many parts of your life are being steered by invisible hands, old judgments, outdated beliefs, unspoken fears? How often do you pause and ask, is this coming from me, or from who I think I'm supposed to be? You say you want freedom. You say you want peace. But how can you ever feel free if you're not the one holding the wheel? So I'll ask again, right here, right now. Who's driving? Part 7. Final reflection. Exist as if unseen by others. Number 1. Only action has true worth. He worked in the same corner of the office for 8 years. Never loud, never late, never the star of any meeting. He didn't post updates about his hustle, didn't wear ambition on his sleeve. He just showed up every day with quiet eyes and steady hands. His name rarely came up in big conversations, but when a crisis hit, when everything broke down and no one knew what to do, people turned to him, not because he talked the most, but because when he did speak, it mattered. Not because he had a title, but because he had trust. He was the one who stayed late without complaining, who helped new employees find their feet, who remembered birthdays without setting reminders, who held the door, the space, the standard, even when no one was watching. And when he left, quietly, without fanfare, the whole office felt it. Suddenly, there was a gap no one could quite explain. Not in the tasks, but in the tone of the place, in the way people carried themselves, in the silence that followed where his presence used to be. This is what we forget in a world obsessed with performance. That value doesn't need a spotlight. That integrity doesn't announce itself. The Stoics believe that virtue is its own reward, that what you do, especially when no one is watching, reveals who you are, more than any speech, any selfie, any applause ever could. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." And that's the difference. Talk is easy. Image is easier. But to live in alignment, to act with kindness, with courage, with consistency, that is rare. That is real. And here's the truth most people miss. You don't need to be known to be meaningful. You don't need to be famous to matter. You don't need millions to recognize your name in order to leave something sacred behind. Sometimes the most powerful lives are the ones lived without ceremony, the ones full of small invisible choices that shape the world in quiet ways. So the question isn't, are they noticing you? The question is, are you living in a way that would still matter, even if no one ever said thank you? Number 2, to live in truth is an act of courage. Be honest, aren't you tired? Tired of performing, tired of curating yourself like a brand, tired of smiling when it hurts, agreeing when you don't, shrinking just to fit into rooms that were never built for you. We talk about courage like it's some grand cinematic thing, but you know what real courage looks like. Waking up and deciding to be yourself, fully, unapologetically, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's messy, even when it's misunderstood. Because living a fake life is easy. You'll be liked, you'll be safe, you'll be acceptable. But every night, when it's just you and the silence, you'll feel the weight of all the things you didn't say, all the versions of you that never got to breathe, all the moments you betrayed your own voice just to stay agreeable. That is the heaviest kind of loneliness, being surrounded, but not seen. Not because people don't care, but because you never gave them the real you to care about. So stop apologizing for your fire. Stop softening your truth to make others comfortable. Stop handing your identity to a world that doesn't even know your name. The people who truly matter, they won't love the version you pretend to be. They'll love the one you've been hiding, the one that's bold, honest, raw, and real. So let that version out. Be loud, be quiet, be weird, be soft, be intense, be brilliant, be broken. But above all, be real. Because the world has enough masks. What it needs is you. If this message stirred something in you, if even one sentence felt like truth, Don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Send it to someone who needs the reminder. Drop a comment. Tell me what part hit home. And if you haven't yet, hit that like button. Subscribe. Stay connected. Not just for the algorithm, but so we keep building a space where truth gets to breathe. But more importantly, take this beyond the screen. Speak the thing you've been holding in. Make the choice that feels honest, not just impressive. Be the version of you that doesn't need approval to exist. Because the world doesn't change when we pretend. It changes when we show up real. So here's your moment. One small act of authenticity today. Say what you mean. Wear what feels like you. Show up without the mask. You don't need permission, just a little courage. And maybe this is where it begins.